Welcome back to your beginner's Java tutorial. This is the second tutorial. In the previous tutorial I showed you how to install Eclipse and everything. So today we're going to actually run our first program. The main chunk of this tutorial is going to be entirely devoted to talking about the concept of variables. To conclude this presentation, I'll make sure I'll summarize what we have done just to ensure you grasp all the concepts behind it. So the first thing you want to do is to create a new Java project. To do so, click on File, New Java Project. The project name is any name you would like it to be. I'm going to name mine as such. Okay. Now you notice by default this intro to vars will be stored at a location called workspace. I want it to be stored at a more specific path. I can do so by unchecking this and then browsing to what folder you want it to be stored at. So in my case, I'm going to store mine under 2 here. So this will allow me in the future to reference back to this folder in case I need it again. Okay, so click on Finish. So one thing about Java is that everything is essentially contained inside a class. So if you want to write a piece of code, you have to put that code in a class. So how do you create a class? To create a class, just expand this guy, right click on Source, New Class. Okay, the name of your class is any name you would like it to be, but by convention the first letter of the class name is to start it with a capital letter. So I'm gonna name mine Bugatti just for simplicity. So click on Finish here. Okay. As shown here, this is the class we just created. We call that Bugatti. Inside these curly braces are what we call the class body. Now you might ask yourself, what the heck is a class anyway? I don't see it. It's so abstract. Well, think of class as the blueprint of your design. Essentially contains 2 sets of data. One is what we call fields. These are attributes and properties of that particular class. For instance, some of the fields associated with this Bugatti class could be the number of tires, the car color of this Bugatti, or the type of model. You could think of these as the properties and attributes of that particular class. Now what's also contained in a class is what we call methods. These are some type of action it's supposed to perform, and you program these to do whatever you want. So for instance, in this Bugatti you might turn on the turbo, you might turn on the light, or you might turn off the light or turn on the engine and so forth. Some type of action is supposed to perform. So in addition to this Bugatti class, you could create multiple classes. So for instance, you would have one called Honda Civic, one called BMW. How do you do that? Well, easy. Just right click the source, new class, and then when you do that, it keeps adding and adding. But ultimately, one of those classes must contain what we call the main function. Essentially, when you click on this run button, the first thing it does is that it looks for the main function and sees what is in the main function in terms of the direction you're giving your main function to perform. So for instance, you can create multiple classes having Honda Civics, BMW, and so forth, but those classes won't do nothing until they're acted upon. So to call them out, you can call them out in the main function. How do you activate this main function? Well, all you gotta do is type this main here and then double brackets. So when you create a new Java project, you must have this main method, because when you run, the first thing it does is look for main method and sees what's inside the main body here, as shown by these 2 brackets here. For now, don't worry about these keywords. Just leave them the way they are. In future tutorial, I'll probably devote the entire tutorial just to talk about them. Okay, so let me give you a brief run through the Eclipse IDE. Down here is where you have the console window. Anytime you have errors, it will display the line of code that the error is at. Also, if it requires any user interaction like entering the username and age and so forth, it's all right here on this window down here. On the left hand side is where you have different types of projects. As shown here, we have intro to vars. You could actually create multiple projects and so forth. In the center you have this text editor, is where you insert all your program code. So I'm going to show you how to print out a simple statement in Java. to print out a simple statement, all you got to do is type this. Okay, semicolon, and inside these parentheses put double quotes, and I'm going to type something random. Okay, and let me copy this and paste. Okay, I'm going to change this real quick and show you something. Now let's do Mercedes. Okay, now to run this, all you gotta do is click this green arrow that says run Bugatti. Your answer, just click OK. Your answer is displayed down here as I shown you. So the reason I have 3 print statements is to show you the difference between System.out.println and System.out.print here. Basically here, System.out.println will tell your program to print this statement and then shift the cursor down to the next line. That's why the Bugatti owns BMW is on the second line. However, if you don't have the ln right after the print, basically you'll print this and then continue the next statement after this here BMW. So let me run this and show you real quick. As shown here, System.println says print this statement and then shift the cursor down here. So that's why the cursor for BMW is shifted down here. Now for this statement here, print this guy but continue the cursor after this word. So I'm gonna print Bugatti owns BMW, and then I have my next statement but continue the cursor here. That's why here Bugatti owns Mercedes is continued after BMW. So that's it with the 2 print statements. I'll show you other ones in future tutorials. Okay, so let's get into the concept of variables as in X, Y, Z when you're introduced in math. However, in the Java world, variables, you can think of it as a placeholder, basically a simple box where 3 things are associated with variables. These are names, types as in, you know, integers or decimal values or characters and so forth, and the values whatever you initialize it to be, or you can leave it empty until a user enters a desired value. I'm going to talk about the types first. In Java we have what we call the primitive data types. These are integers, which are whole numbers that can range from -2 billion all the way up to 2 billion. Now if you need numbers with decimal values, you could use float or double. The difference between a double and a float lays on their precision. As shown here, the float could hold up to 7 digits. However, the double, you need more precision. It could hold up to 15 digits. Of course, the downside is the size it occupies. The other one is character, which is char, short for character. These are A, B, C, and all the characters you see on your keyboard. Now you can find a list of them on the ASCII table that can range from -28 all the way up to 127. And we also have Boolean, which are true or false. I'll show you how to use them in Eclipse right now. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to declare them in Java. To do so, you have to specify the data type. So since we're going to work with whole numbers, these are integers. So go ahead, type int, and then after the data type, you have the variable name. I'm just going to call mine x. Now you could end it with a semicolon, or you could initialize x to be some value here. So let's do that for y, 10. Okay. Now you could go ahead, perform any math operations you like. So I'm going to call mine int z, and I'm going to do x times y. Okay, and oops, sorry, x times y, and you end it with a semicolon for all these. Just don't forget that. To print out the answer, all you got to do is put z here. Since I already have z as integer, it will display the value. So to run it, you'll see the answer like this, 50. Let me show you how to use a float. So put on float. Let's put r for my float. Put 10.5, and after this value, you have to put f here, which stands for float. Is float. Let's put 2.5 f semicolon, and then let's do some math operations such as, oops, my float divided by his float, and so forth. and then we want to print out the answer. Where is the answer stored? Well, the answer is stored in the variable called our float, so just do our float. And of course we want to skip lines, so just to have separate lines. Okay, now let's do characters. Characters, you have to put char. I'm gonna call mine favorite char, and single quotes, semicolon, I'm gonna put K. Okay, and we want to print this out. Well, we could reference it into this variable name called favorite char here. Now let's do boolean. Boolean, is it true? That's the variable I called it, and let's put true. And let's copy one of these and print out that guy, which is called is it true? Okay, now to run this, go ahead, click on this run, and all your answers are displayed here. 50, which is Z, that's 10 times 5, and 4.2 is the division of this guy divided by this guy, and K is the character we printed out from favorite char. Favorite char is right here, and boolean, and we initialize it to be true, so your result will be true. So if you want to change it to false, oops, and run this, it'll give you false. That's it with the data types. I'll expose you more as we dive deeper in our tutorials. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about variable names. Notice X, Y, Z in this case is perfectly fine, but there's actually a set of rules that we have to follow in Java. So for instance, the first character must be an alphabet or an underscore. In this example, you see the data type and then the variable name Smokey. This is perfectly fine. However, you cannot use numbers as your first character on your variable name. The second case is all succeeding characters, which are second characters, must be letters or digits. So here, this is a special character which is not allowed. However, on this guy, it's perfectly fine. And of course, there's no crazy characters here, as shown here, exclamation mark, and no two successive underscores are allowed because this is system use only. And one of the major one is reserved keywords. There's actually more than 30 here. One of them is if. You cannot use that as your variable name, class, and switch. There's a bunch of them actually, but you don't have to memorize them, and I don't think you should. As you progress in my tutorials, you'll probably get a feel why not to use them. So I know it's a bit overwhelming having to remember all these rules, but if you follow a set of conventions and mix with practice, you should be fine. So some of the conventions are listed here. For instance, you want to begin your variable name with a lowercase letter, and you want them to be meaningful. You don't want to call them X, Y, and Z because other programmers might not know what X, Y, Z represents. Now, assuming this is the way how you declare your variable names, how I would personally do it is as follow: lowercase letter followed by an uppercase word. All of these are consistent versus a mixture of these here. So whatever conventions you follow, just be consistent. I'll give you an example right now. So bad example, X, you let it be 100. Good variable name, call it my balance. So in the future, you know what my balance refers to. To conclude the tutorial, I'm going to summarize and wrap up everything we've done today. Today I show you how to print out statements and show you the two print statements, println and print. The println shifts your cursor to the next line. I also show you how to create classes inside a class that has fields and methods, and also introduce you to the concept of variables associated with a variable or their name, type, and value, and how you declare them in Java. You put their type, their variable name, and some value. You could set it to some value or you can leave it as empty. At the end, I show you the naming conventions that you should follow in order to avoid some of the conflict. I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Bye.